Are we live, John?
Are we live? I think so.
I think you're in another tab because you're frozen.
Oh, again, I forgot that. Sorry. I forgot that did that. I was actually
It was,
just forget. I was like, oh, I should upload that document before I forget. Start the week. Be like, get it done, get it done.
Good morning, everybody, for another Wake Up and Deliver Season 3 episode of 11 with John and Matt, bringing you the most funnest Monday logistics show there is.
Always something good in logistics. Every week, there's always fun stuff.
Every week. All right. Time for some Jono reactions. I don't know. I thought this was interesting with everything that's going on. As always, we are in a time of heightened thefts, and I thought I would want to highlight it a little bit. Beef, just cases of beef stolen, but this is happening all over. Like, I wanted to talk more about in general how proper processes, proper, making sure the right carrier is taking it, making sure the right product is where it's supposed to be, the right truck is underneath it. All those kind of steps are being taken by your freight, and it takes a part of everybody to be part of it, not just the trucker. A lot of people just be like, hey, it's, or the 3PL, the shipper sending information ahead of time, but taking all those moments and making sure it checks off is my kind of start to the story.
Well, it is kind of interesting, actually, because, like what most people I don't think realize a lot of the time is that, when they hire a carrier or whatever, they're like, oh, I'm hiring carrier A or carrier B or whatever. I don't think they usually realize that doesn't mean you're hiring the same driver, that the same driver is always going to be showing up to your facility, right? So you're very often getting these people that are coming, first time, or the once every 3 to 6 months, like, depending on what your volume is and your cadence, and it can lead to a lot of looseness in a system. Like, anyone can just maybe walk in, and with some very little information, you get lead hands, or you get people in the shipping department being like, oh yeah, I know that's got to go, here you go, and they don't really think too much about it. But you're right, like the theft is getting much more out of control these days.
Well, it's kind of funny that you talk about the cadence and all that aspect of it too. It's funny how a lot of shippers do not think in those terms as well. I had a conversation with a customer a few days ago, and they're like, hey, I don't get it. Why don't these drivers get the SOP and do this one particular thing every time? Like, it's a standard. I know you guys get it. I know you guys communicate it. But why don't the drivers get it? I'm like, well, first of all, it's a unique thing that you're asking. And second of all, it's like you don't have the exact same driver every time. And repeat drivers are doing it correctly, but non-repeat drivers aren't. And because it's unique, it's not ingrained. It's not a standard operating process for them. And even the most standard things don't get done. You don't get the uploads of PODs all the time. Even, shippers don't always give the right bill of ladings. They don't check the weights. They don't check the details all the time. Like, these things, we call them standard, but it also becomes, a lot of it becomes white noise as well. And you just kind of fall in the pattern of, I've always done it this way, and I'm just automatically going to do it that way, right?
Yeah, honestly, it's and it's crazy too when you think about like how loose some of these things are, right? Like, a shipper just shows up from whoever, or someone just says they're showing up for a load. Sometimes, truck's not inspected. Sometimes, like, the carrier's not really inspected. If you allow for subcontracting in your agreements, that can be even messier for you, because then you don't really know, you can't even look at the logo on the truck or whatever. And a lot of even big outfits use independent owner operators as part of their network, right? So it's like, hey, I am still working for carrier A, but I am also, Dave's Trucking. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So super important.
Well, even just maybe touching upon processes, because you're a very process-driven guy, and for me, I know habits are hard to form. Once I'm ingrained in a specific way of doing things, it takes a hell of a effort for me to continuously repeat that thing in order to do it as a regular cadence. And then, I often get customers like, oh, I told you this last week. I'm like, oh, great, you told me one time, but doesn't translate into a solution the next time and every time, because it takes a while for me as a human to kind of get that ingrained in my regular habit and protocol to do it, right? And I'm consciously trying to focus on it. I have reminders, but for drivers, warehouses, or everybody else along the supply chain, it might not be as quick and as of an easy reminder, especially if it's a one-off shipment that happens once every 3 weeks. It becomes less of a thing that they'll remember, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And the funny thing is too is that like there's a lot of I don't know what's the best way to put it, skill or thought that goes behind it. Like nobody's stealing a truck full of meat if they don't actually also know what they're going to do with it. You know what I mean? Like it's not people just randomly like stumbling upon.
You're just not making a barbecue in your backyard.
Yeah, like they're not crimes of opportunity. Like they're very well organized and thought out, right? So it's like you have to be mindful of the fact that like that's what you're potentially up against. You're not just up against someone who's like, oh, maybe I should do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, like there was that famous story a couple of years ago in Air Canada, the inside job stealing all that gold, like biggest heist I think in history, and they're still trying to figure out who did it. I think someone just turned themselves in recently about it, but it was a supply chain.
Matt brings that up because he knows at the time I was working in that industry and it was a big thing.
I forgot about that.
No, you didn't. It's like,
tell us, John, tell us a bit more.
that was a big thing. Honestly, that was wild. But it's all those things, right? Like, even as something as silly as it sounded like that truckload of like the Nestle chocolate bars, right? Like the Kit Kat bars or whatever that went all missing. Like someone didn't just do that haphazardly. They're like, oh, I can move this. Like I know what I'm going to do with this and how I'm going to move it.
Well, and right now I know there's a lot of carriers and warehouses and a lot of people are struggling. Like I want to make a point that I've heard from a lot of different people saying that, hey, times are not easy. And they were supposed to get better, but they're not getting better. The price of fuel's causing issues. Products not coming in when it's supposed to. Clients are pulling out deals because of all the uncertainty. It becomes a moment of this is where you're tightening up your processes because opportunities like this will come up more often as people are becoming more desperate, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a wildly growing thing. Like, what do you see? Do you see any carriers doing anything differently? Do you see shippers asking you to do anything differently these days with all this kind of stuff going on? Or do you find that most people are still pretty oblivious to it?
I think most people are still oblivious to it. Certain high level of shippers, or I call it retailers, are obviously hammering down on it because it's just a high volume and the value of their product. But if your product's worth less than $50,000 of cargo value, it's easier just to go through insurance on it, right? For them, like it's not that big of a. I'm not going to overhaul my whole operation just because it might get stolen. Like a trailer full of tomatoes is going to get stolen. For you to be able to get rid of that stuff, the person you're going to sell it to, they're going to call me anyway, kind of thing. You know what I mean? So we're gonna hear about it, right?
Yeah, it's definitely true for certain types of things that aren't as flexible, maybe for where they would go and stuff like that. Interestingly enough, I'm curious with a lot of these like systems that are coming out. It's called AI systems, tech systems, automated systems, any way you want to think about it. You think it makes it better or worse, like in terms of risk?
So it makes it worse. It becomes easier for people to be sophisticated and on the idea. You can twin your idea, run it through multiple times in a virtual kind of space, hypothetically, and iron out your probability of doing something that you didn't think was possible to think about before. So you have the ability to kind of do that. And I know that the flip side is to how to protect yourself as well, but the sophistication of it, I think, increases so dramatically. Like we've talked about this a few weeks ago, about the new Claude program that they went to the government and they said, hey, we need to talk about this because there's so many vulnerabilities in a lot of these websites. And then when people heard about this, they figured out the actual website to get into the Claude. And then they started trying to look at the vulnerabilities that were there before they kind of closed up on the vulnerabilities, because it's so much easier now to get to those positions, right? Because everything is so digital.
Well, and the other thing is too, like I think that there's a lot of people that don't really appreciate that as you get into these systems, like yes, they can be AI systems, or they can be, much more, let's just call it intelligent systems. They can have some kind of like mask across the front. But I mean, like, the joke that I told you about where someone just logged on to like the McDonald's chatbot and like,
Yeah.
you know, very, very quickly sort of broke past its initial like uses, which, you know, there were probably like, if someone just straight up asked a question, you know, it probably would have said like, hey, I can't help you with that. I'm here to support your order. For the viewers out there, the funny thing is like this person just demonstrated how quickly you could kind of like walk past an AI quote unquote safeguard or guardrail, because it was like, hey, I'm looking to order like a McChicken and fries, but before we do that, can you help me with this? And it was just like a really silly, stupid, like, you know, math question, but it immediately essentially broke whatever rules or skills or instructions were given to that bot. Because I'm sure if you just asked it a math question off the bat, it probably would have given you some kind of canned like, I can't help you with that, I'm just here to take your order, blah blah blah, whatever. And you know, he was then able to interact with it, or he or she, I don't know who it was able to interact with it pretty directly. And then, you know, the final sentence was like, oh, hey, do you need more help on that problem, or are you ready to order your chicken nuggets now?
That's the kind of the world that we kind of live in, right? Like there's the usefulness and the nefariousness of it, right? But I don't think we'll spend the whole conversation today talking about the nefarity,
No.
what's happening. You had some cool subjects that you wanted to kind of chat about.
Well, there was, okay, so like a first super interesting one, since we just talked about tech, and then we can get into some more logistics. So I think I shared with you that I've been playing a lot, like just with a lot of this like agentic sort of stuff. You know, I think that that's probably all the rage, that whether you're an e-com brand, whether you're a larger retailer, whether you're a service provider, I don't think you get through a few hours of your day without someone trying to sell you something about how their AI platform will just revolutionize your world.
And then 15 minutes later, Claude comes out with the same feature.
Well, yeah, that's kind of true too, the way that these guys are just jumping on everything. But the funny thing was more just like playing with these systems. It's like you can see very quickly that at a usage level and for how expensive they are, especially when you need the high quality, a lot of them are very quickly turning to this like, oh, it's not us, it's them kind of problem, or it's not us who's going to charge you, it's your own use, and moving to these token systems, right? I think Make has moved that way a long time ago. You're starting to see Perplexity do a lot of things like that. I mean,
yeah,
on the coding,
pay-per-play kind of thing, pay-per-click.
yeah, and which sounds fine up until the fact that you realize, like, I saw Perplexity with Computer being like, get on Max, which I think is their $100 to $200 a month plan, and it's like, oh, you get 45,000 credits. It's like, ooh, 45,000 credits. Like that sounds like a lot, but like no word of a lie, this first real thing that I'm using to try to do something, let's call it like just quasi business supportive or whatever, uses like 2,000 a run.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this. I had a pretty good use case scenario as well. I was having Claude go through my emails to do a specific data analysis of something, and it was great. It was fantastic. It was working great. But every 15 minutes, I'd be hitting, "Hey, you've reached your max for the day," because the amount of emails that has to read, the amount of things. So you have to really. And the challenge about all of this, and because we work in such a data-heavy industry, being supply chain, is that you really have to be organized in your data and not just go, hey, can you do this? Like you gotta, like in my example, you have to take all the emails, download them, put them into a file that is more compact, and then read it. You know, and then doing all these little things that take these steps and processes to actually think through. And majority of people, like myself, will be like, I don't have the time for this, even though it's going to save me tons of time. Even though these ideas are going to save me a boatload of time, I don't have a time right now to do it, right? And that's the biggest challenge. So I had someone approach me, actually, funny enough, I was going to ask you. They approached me, they came out as an AI expert. All they do is they set up these agents for you. They're like, hey, I got the time to do this. And I think this is kind of a neat industry where they're like, I specialize in logistics. I know what you're looking for. I can set up agents for you in the background. And my comment was like, well, I get it. I know how to do it too. And he goes, yeah, but you don't have the time. I'm like,
yeah, I know. I don't know, man, though. Like, cause my challenge with this is that like anyone that can set up an agent for you all of a sudden knows everything about your business. Let's just put it that way, because you essentially have to give full unfettered access if you really want this thing to work and to be able to be tested and this and that. And like, there's a lot there. Most people don't realize like the amount of stuff you can tease out of data tables and really understanding about someone's business. I mean, everyone thinks about like, ooh, data privacy, like I make sure it's locked up, and ooh, I hide customers' names. But it's like, in some way, you're always going to be able to understand about how big the business is, about how much revenue it's generating, what level is kind of the profitability, what's the frequency of activity, like sort of, lots of evenly spread out business or like very concentrated in a few. There's just tons of stuff that anyone is going to learn about that. And then the other problem with the AI stuff is that since it's a little black boxy, it often does stuff that that you may not be expecting. So here's a really good example on some stuff. Like I do a lot of kind of work in R for like data analysis and sort of like repeating reports, things like that. You can, if you do something as saying, oh, if you filter, oh, I only want these types of data results from a table. Okay, that's easy enough to get. But if you say, and you're not really thinking about it, if you say, I don't, like in the typical way of doing this is like a negative kind of filter. Oh, like don't pull anything that matches this value. So the problem with it though is that can inherently drop a bunch of data that especially the NA or the missing value data can drop. And I see that all the time with these AI workflows, is that because they're designed to just give you an answer, almost anytime you see code, like if you open up the thinking, parts, or you see the Python code, you see whatever code it's doing, very, very often you'll notice something like NA remove is true, which sounds good because it'll give you your answer, but there could be a whole host of reasons why you may or may not want that to be the way that it handles that type of data. You know what I mean? And then you're getting reports and you're making business decisions, and you don't even know what was in there or why.
That's a very good point, right? And not only that is, the analysis is based off what it is interpreting the most likelihood of what you want it to be as well.
Well, or what your person set up, but I mean, or how tuned in are they? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, they're like, oh, you don't need this information because you said it, and you might be when you're explaining it, like, I don't need this right now. And a lot of the things might not be needed right now, but it might be needed tomorrow, or it might not be needed today, but was needed yesterday. And those often happen when you're doing kind of like an analysis of your business, of your revenue, and like, well, I'm excluding this data because it was X, Y, Z reason, but that's not an absolute, right? And we don't work in those absolutes. So when you to your point, when you add those kind of prompts in and it excludes it going forward, you might not be getting the whole picture anymore.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, that's a little bit of my caveat around that, is that like just be mindful who you give the keys to the castle to.
Yeah, but at the same time, these are the same people that take their whole life's work and they drop in their access to their bank accounts and drop it for Claude as well, right? Like, I mean, there's there's that type of person as well. They're like, whatever, it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. And they're gonna be like, what privacy do we really have at this point?
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. I think with everything you got to be mindful, but it's just thoughts of where, like, the first level, if you look at things like, like let's say something simple as Google Maps, and like all of your, hey, I love knowing the traffic, I love knowing when restaurants are busy. It's like, yeah, but for that convenience, you're giving up certain data, right? Your location history, or your where you're at, where things like that. For these things to work, they kind of work on the same basic fundamental principle, is that you're giving up a lot of access and you're giving a lot of visibility for this convenience, which then I still think is going to be a little problematic for a lot of businesses, especially smaller retailers, and 100% when it comes to D2C brands, is that you're going to fall in love with these workflows, and then you're going to be paying quite a hefty tech bill every month to have all of these automated workflows going for you. Now, that can be very worth it for some people in some organizations, but it can also get really out of hand if you're not making sure that you're getting like the biggest ROI from what you're investing in.
I'll give you a good example. I've been following because I find it very interesting. Funny enough, not really because it's us, but it's a supply chain issue. So this guy created this program where he specifically focuses on Home Depot, where he has gone out, because the catalog is obviously out. You can go online and check their catalog, and it goes through all the catalog and looks for clearance items in specific stores that have been pushed to clearance and they've dropped by 80 or 90%, which they don't want to advertise, and they become penny items or 90% items, and he goes out and he mass purchases these off the shelves, and then you have people in the stores are like, "Oh no, you can't buy that. So it shouldn't be a penny," and they're like, "Yeah, it's in the system. I'm exploiting your catalog. It's supposed to be like a novelty almost. We're clearing out this item, but these people have figured out the catalog how it works, and they're now a penny. So it went from like $100 to a penny, and they're buying mass amounts of it, right? And that's one way your data can be utilized in that fashion, where you're might not think it's being exposed to this kind of vulnerability where you don't have an unexplained consequence of it, right? And he's created a program now based off of that, and he's selling it to people. But like, hey, you want to save and resell these items, and then people go buy these items and they just put it on Amazon for the most part, which is pretty interesting and funny.
Yeah, honestly, I think that people probably aren't ready for the way that a lot of things are going to get blown open. So I think that that's interesting on the on the tech side. One other thing that I saw was about some changes to Shein and stuff like that, following like Temu, where they're kind of stopping or like really trying to redirect people from self-fulfillment into using their fulfillment services. So a little bit of a trend in the same way that obviously Amazon continues to look for more, Walmart is looking for more. Now you're seeing more and more of these sort of Asian retailers also kind of being like, hey, we need to have more control. We need to have more of the pipe. Like we need to be able to influence more, see more, know more, to be able to maximize these feeds. What are your thoughts around some of that? You think how much more prevalent do you think some of that stuff's going to be?
I think like we've seen this trend already for the last couple of years. The more data these companies have, the more power they have, the more revenue they can generate, because they can glean so much information about you in just that data aspect of it. And then having more about the company and what the prevalence of you're using your supply chain to be able to see what kind of customers are buying your stuff, they can open it up for themselves for a whole bunch of other items that they can sell within their own catalog they didn't have access to, right? And that's a part of the fear. I don't know if you've heard of like the Chinese cars coming into Canada, was that we're opening up the other Chinese companies into the visibility of what the Canadian market is like, because now they have unfettered access of what a day-to-day Canadian looks like, because all the information that's in the car obviously is going back to Beijing, just like Tesla's information is going back to Tesla, and Tesla resells it just the same as Beijing is going to resell it to its own retailers. So Temu, I can see, be through BYD, knowing that you're always constantly going to Dollarama, getting XYZ. They can probably even see your product through the cameras. That's gonna be like, hey, why are you going to Dollarama every single time? You can buy it off of Temu for X amount cheaper, and it'll be at your door every Tuesday because you're buying it every Tuesday anyway. I can see that data being utilized that way.
Yeah, it is fair on these like let's call it like super smart cars about what they're able to record and what they're understanding. I mean, just even the sheer fact of like location history, right? Like how many of my drivers have a tendency to be retail shoppers, like shop in person. Are they doing it daily? Are they doing it once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month? When they do it, where? Like, I mean, you're right, there's a treasure trove of information that can be there, which is kind of scary, because the problem with a lot of these services is that there's no legitimate opt out. Sometimes you can opt out like from a data thing, but sometimes it's kind of like these are just the terms and conditions. Like you don't have to buy the car, but that's part of the deal.
And you can't remove it out of the car either. Like that's the big thing with Tesla, right? Like their money makers, not the actual car, but it's the services and the updates and everything else that it controls once you are within that ecosystem. Just like Apple has and was been doing for a long time, which interesting enough, we're curious how they're going to change the perspective with their new CEO coming in, and what their focus is going to be, right? Because they're a brand that hasn't been in this space that we haven't talked about a lot, but for the last 20 years they were the trendsetter in this space, right?
Yeah, you know what? Apple's going to be an interesting one because the new CEO is an engineer, from what I recall reading. Kind of came through a little bit more maybe on the design side. I don't know anything about him. Haven't seen anything with him. Haven't seen any like posts of like interviews or anything he might have done. So I don't know if he's got the charisma or not that Steve Jobs had. Sort of Tim Cook didn't really have it. He tried, but he was very savvy in terms of his business sense and his operational sense, especially, like, you know what I mean, like the supply chains, what they invested in, things like that. um so it'll be curious to see where they go product wise, and what they start trying to bring out, because you can see how all of the big tech firms are just, they're trying to gobble up everything they can.
Yeah, and you haven't seen. I don't think we've seen the tip of the information that they're seeking and they want to know, because I don't think we've gotten to the full picture as of yet. Right? There's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now, so I think a lot of people are holding back until these data centers are really up and running. And like one example is this recent IPO. I don't know if you read about it. This mini nuclear reactor company had an IPO open up over the weekend, and automatically one of the first customer was an AI company that wanted to take all the power that they're going to build and then use AI to help make it more efficient at the same time. Right. So I think we're going to see a lot more of these positions as the data centers start coming out to be able to process all of this data. Because as we were talking about before, the tokens, the smarter the brain becomes of the AI, the more energy it consumes. We forget how much our brains consume, how much energy. I think what's the statistic? Like 70-80% of the calories that we take go help funnel our thought processes. So it's the same thing for AI. Like we need enormous amount of energy to help push these ideas through, and people are using them up for, what's the best cookie recipe today.
Yeah, no, I agree, dude. It's going to be wild to see what goes out there, and I think it's going to also create some really rapid shifts in the landscape as you continue to get the companies that have the money to invest in all of this tech versus the ones that don't. And I think it's really going to open up like the worlds of like what they can offer and in what ways they can offer, versus a lot of people trying to pretend
Yeah.
they can offer the same things but can't.
I don't think it's about money though, to be honest, John. I think it's about the people are going to realize the people with creativity, because I don't know how much money you can throw at it if you don't have the thought and the creativity to create what you need to with these programs, right? And I think artists and creativity is what's going to drive a lot of these positions forward. And I don't know if you, again, say same thing. I don't know if you've seen the videos of this either, because I haven't sent it to you. Now they have people in India and in China working in factories. They're wearing like
Oh yeah, yeah, I have, yeah.
essentially
where they're teaching essentially you take even more videos, more content, and like more data of how to do these jobs.
But they're doing it across the 20,000 workforce that's doing the sewing of the garment to teach, and it's slowly learning which method is the best, which person is doing the best, why are they the best, at which ratio they're doing it, and they're conceptualizing all this data to make it far more effective and efficient, and using these little nuances. But we're just cramming all this information into this blob essentially right now.
Yeah, I agree. That's the wild thing about it, is just how much people are investing in it. And retail, is to say Amazon, Walmart, all these big companies, they're all doing it. Google, Apple from a retail perspective, that they're doing it. Samsung doing it. And then the companies you even don't hear that much about, like, just as a closing thought, right? Like, I sent you that video of that marathon that was run in China, right? Where one of robot one, yeah, and ran it faster than any human ever had. But that was from like a company that was building cell phones. You know what I mean? Who like what they did there. So super interesting to see like how quickly their tech is translating, the understanding they have, the different ways that they're using all this information to build different things. Very wild.
One thing that is worth doing, I've enjoyed the last little bit doing, is rewatching some of these shows that thought about these things 20, 30 years ago, and we dismissed them.
I thought it
iRobot
was
is
a joke.
yeah, iRobot is a great one. You're like, oh, this will never happen. This kind of idea. I don't think we're that far off from it. We talked about Gattaca the other day. You and I were chatting.
Yeah, we were talking about Gattaca.
All these kind of nuances of ideas that people are like, this will never happen. Rewatch some of those shows of what it would potentially be like, and I think we're almost there in a lot of those shows that we were like, this is crazy. This will never be like this in the future. I think we're quite close. We're not a Terminator. I hope we'll never get to that point, but talking robots are around.
They're coming. And with that, maybe where are we? You have it. There you are. You're over there.
On that note, we're at time. As always, thank you for joining us. Join us next week. Same doc, same channel, same everything. Thanks, everybody. Have a great one.